And thanks to the organizers for having me. I'm Allison O'Connell. I'm in marketing at Aries Systems, and I'm really happy to be here today to talk a little bit about books workflow and what we've been up to at Aries Systems. So one of the great things that's happened over the past 10 years is that thousands of journals have moved off of desktop-based workflows onto web-based manuscript tracking systems such as Editorial Manager. This has been a great success in the sense that journals have benefited from 24 by 365 access to files and metadata, the flexibility to introduce standards, and helpful reporting so that management can improve processes. So there has been a lot of success on the journal side. Why hasn't the same thing happened for books? Well, when you look at the way that commercial publishers and scholarly societies are doing books workflow today, it's happening on individual user desktops in Word and Excel files, and that means that workflow is really quite vulnerable to people being out of the office. There's really no flexibility for a staff member to job share, take over for one another, and there's not helpful reporting available, so that often management can't really improve the process. And this is strange because when you look at books and journal workflow, they're really quite similar. On the journal side, you have content metadata, roles, tasks, email templates, and reporting. And on the book side, you have the very same thing. And yet there are real differences between books and journals. For instance, with books, you begin production immediately and in parallel to editorial workflow. And on the journal side, historically, production doesn't begin until after acceptance. You also need a much different data structure to support books workflow than journals because, as Alice said, a book can be anything from reference work to encyclopedia, handbooks, chapter books, textbooks. So you really need many more levels to support a book's workflow than journals. And what all of this means is that you can't just take a system that is made for journals and try to make it fit for books. So how do we solve the problem? Well, one suggestion would be with systems that are optimized for books workflows, and that is what EM for Books is. So I'm going to talk now a little bit about what Aries has been up to in creating EM for Books. So EM for Books takes the editorial and production workflows and runs them in parallel, which includes all the benefits of being able to configure roles, files, forms, reporting, and email reminders. But there's a lot more. EM for Books includes a reskinned user interface that features book-appropriate nomenclature. So for example, instead of seeing the word author, you could see the word contributor. And another example would be that words such as section, chapter, and book show up within the interface as well. EM for Books features the data model appropriate to support books workflows, which includes managing, setting up and managing sections and chapters, as well as projects and managing a book at a project level, and the ability to set up template projects. EM for Books features much richer author management capability. So this includes being able to not just invite, but also assign authors where you've met with them and agreed with them that they're going to contribute specific content. EM for Books also allows for the upload of author list spreadsheets where that prep work has taken place offline. EM for Books includes the metadata fields that are specific to book workflows. So one example, again, is ISBN, and rather than capturing the ISSN that you would in a journal's workflow. But that's just one example, and there are dozens of other metadata fields in EM for Books that wouldn't show up if you were working in a journal's environment. EM for Books is able to support the standards which are important to books workflow. So for example, BITS is the JATS for books, and being able to export and transfer files in BITS format is very important to books workflow. So another thing that we noticed is that the business model in use with Editorial Manager for journals, which is to charge per submission, didn't really make sense for books. And this is because there can be multiple editions or multiple revisions in a book's workflow, as well as a different granularity on submissions. And for this reason, we made the decision to transition to a per-seat model for EM for books, so that customers weren't employing suboptimal workflows simply to save on costs. So it's a per-seat model for EM for books with unlimited submissions. So EM for Books is a solution in live deployment with several customers, including our launch and development partner, Wolters Kluwer. And EM for Books is still being developed, and it has many capabilities that will continue to be evolved. And for that reason, I would love to hear from you what you'd like to see on the book side. I'll be at our booth, number 200, rather than 200A, over the next couple of days. And I look forward to meeting you there and hopefully talking with you about your requirements. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And a very smooth transition to the last talk, which is also about business models, which is given by Yasmin Lang.
I'm actually the odd one out, because I'm not speaking about infrastructure, but if you had a chance to read the Scholarly Kitchen blog today, you might notice that infrastructure is extremely important for open access to succeed. So I sort of fit. Brill is a 330-year-old scholarly publisher. We are based in the Netherlands and have a backlist of about 20,000 titles. So if I tell you that we have 212 open access books, and some of which are here on the slide, you might not be super impressed, but it actually shoots us into the, it shoots us into the list of the 10 biggest open access publishers. Most of the big university presses and commercial presses are actually haven't published as many books as we have. I've compiled this list from the Directory of Open Access Books, which includes 7,600 peer-reviewed monographs, published in over 20 languages by as many as 180 different publishers. Those figures are not super impressive if you think about the fact that EBSCO alone has over 600,000 ebooks on offer. But what is impressive is the annual growth rate that SIMBA suggests for open access books, which is about 30% each year. So this is something that a business developer, which I am, is getting excited about. Open access, the growth is mainly funder-driven, of course. Funding bodies like the Wellcome Trust or the ERC have recently expanded their open access mandates to include books and book chapters. But despite this super positive outlook, there is, of course, a little problem, and the problem is called cost. The money. In 2016, Ithaca put together an interesting survey on the cost of publishing monographs, and that gives you an average price tag of around $25,000. That's a lot of money. In order to fund open access books, there are a variety of business models necessary, not just one, like there is in open access journal publishing. Of course, there is the gold model, the author pays, funder pays model. But in contrast to journal publishing, this is very much dependent on print revenue that is still flowing. You can see that here most of the fees charged do not come close to covering the cost for a monograph, apart maybe from the last two ones here on the list. But they are CC BY licenses, so that means that basically the publishing fee needs to cover the entire revenue. One innovative business model, I think, is Knowledge Unlatched, and we have Marcel here to talk a bit more in detail about their success story. What Knowledge Unlatched is doing, it was founded in 2014 by Francis Pinter. Knowledge Unlatched is gathering library buy-in for a collection of books prior to publication. So basically, they do crowdsourcing among libraries for open access books. And what I like so much about KU is that it moves the burden of funding from the author, away from the author, but it remains publisher independent. There are, of course, a number of institutionally funded publishers out there that offer free publication for authors, and which is great. But KU is doing that publisher independent, so anyone can participate. To date, 450 books have been published by KU, and also 450 libraries, which is quite funny, are participating in that scheme. So it's one book per library. But to go back to the gold model, what does it mean if your customer focus is shifting from the librarian who would have usually bought your ebook collection to the author who comes to you with a pot of money? It certainly doesn't mean that we as a publisher can compromise on peer review. And peer review that might be new to journal people is not something that is standard in monograph publishing. But I think it needs to be standard in open access monograph publishing, because otherwise you won't be able to build a reputation. From my perspective, building an open access book program provides us as traditional publisher with a great opportunity to listen even more carefully to our authors and to the needs they have, and to make transparent the services we offer to them. And needless to say, it's also, and I have some people that are here on the panel as well and that are present at the conference in other panels. We as publisher, as a smaller, medium-sized publisher, luckily don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are services out there which we can use. For example, at Brill, we use Kudos, or we work with PeerWith in order to improve author services. And it's needless to say that open access also changes the indicators for success, because the print sales are not a good enough indicator anymore to let you know whether your open access book has an impact or not. It's of course about usage and about citations, about online mentions, and so forth. The new kids on the block, some of which are here on the slide, are fueling this development, and we look at them sometimes with great envy because they start from scratch. They are digitally born, full open access, sometimes non-for-profit, but usually deeply rooted within their community. And they, like Language Science Press, for example, it was just mentioned in John's talk, they cleverly positioned themselves in certain disciplinary niches, which is a great thing. And they have an overall refreshing and no-print legacy approach to publishing, and this is maybe something we can discuss about. What does it mean that 80% of the revenue for books is still coming from print? What does it mean for the further development of the infrastructure? And that's also what I think for open access to succeed as a business model for books. We need, of course, better publishing services. We need to show how books, what an impact books make, but we also need to improve that infrastructure. I could talk for hours about the fact that it's very difficult to get free content into library catalogs, but unfortunately I don't have the time, so maybe we can speak about that later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.